The engines of the Boeing 777 hummed with a promise of power. But inside the cabin of Sovereign Air, Flight 902, the atmosphere was dead silent. Captain Harrison Grant stood in the aisle, his face flushed with a dangerous shade of crimson. Pointing a shaking finger at seat 1A, he wasn't looking at a terrorist. He wasn't looking at a drunkard. He was staring down a 17-year-old boy in a vintage hoodie who was calmly sipping orange juice. "I don't care who you think you are," Grant spat, his voice echoing off the overhead bins. "I am the captain of this vessel, and I say you don't belong here. You get off, or this plane doesn't move." It was the mistake that would end his career before the sun set. He thought he was kicking off a thug. He didn't realize he was grounding the entire airline. The early morning fog at JFK International Airport was just beginning to lift, revealing the sprawling, concrete labyrinth of the tarmac. Inside Terminal 4, the air smelled of stale coffee and expensive perfume, the specific cocktail of anxiety and luxury that defined international travel. For Captain Harrison Grant, it was supposed to be a routine Tuesday. Harrison was a man cut from a very specific cloth, the kind of pilot who still believed the skies belonged to the old guard. At 58, he had the silver hair of a statesman and the ego of a dictator. He wore his 4 stripes not just as a rank, but as a divine right. He had flown for Sovereign Air for 30 years, and in that time, he had cultivated a reputation. To the executives, he was reliable. To the flight attendants, he was the emperor. He walked onto the jet bridge with his co-pilot, a younger, nervous man named Timothy Leach. Harrison adjusted his tie, checking his reflection in the glass of the terminal window. Perfect. "Big load today." "Tim," Harrison said, his voice a practiced baritone. "Full first class. Let's make sure the service is up to scratch. I don't want any riff-raff slipping past the gate agents." "Yes, Captain," Tim replied. Keeping his head down, he knew Harrison's moods. They boarded the aircraft, a gleaming beast of a machine destined for London Heathrow. Harrison did his usual walk-through, his eyes scanning the cabin with critical precision. He checked the galley, barked a comment about the ice levels to the lead flight attendant, Beatrice, and then turned his attention to first class. That's when he stopped. The first-class cabin of Sovereign Air was a sanctuary of beige leather and walnut trim. It was designed for CEOs, diplomats, and old money. It was not designed, in Harrison's opinion, for the boy sitting in seat 1A. The passenger looked no older than 17. He was wearing an oversized, slate-grey hoodie that looked like it had been through the wash 100 times, distressed jeans, and a pair of beat-up high-top sneakers. He had large, noise-cancelling headphones around his neck and was scrolling through a tablet with a cracked screen. Harrison's brow furrowed. He felt that familiar prickle of irritation he always got when order was disrupted. This was his plane, his domain, and something about this kid didn't fit the geometry of his world. Harrison marched into the cockpit, threw his flight bag into the corner, and turned to Beatrice, who had followed him in with the flight manifest. "Beatrice," Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. "Who is in 1A? Beatrice, a veteran flight attendant who had survived 3 airline mergers and 2 divorces. Didn't flinch. She glanced at her tablet. "That's Mr. King, Captain. Jordan King." "King," Harrison scoffed, removing his cap and smoothing his hair. "He looks like he hopped the fence at a music festival. Are we running a charity flight, or did the gate agents finally lose their minds and start accepting bus passes? He has a valid ticket." "Captain," Beatrice said. her tone professional but weary. Full fare. Paid in cash, actually. Well, debit. Whatever. The system cleared him. Paid in cash. Harrison's eyes narrowed. A kid that age drops 10 grand on a one-way ticket to London. Beatrice, use your head. Drug mule, credit card fraud. Or he stole his daddy's card and is running away. He went through TSA. Harrison, he's cleared. TSA misses knives in shoes. Beatrice, they certainly miss a punk with a stolen identity. Harrison turned back to look through the cockpit door. The boy, Jordan, had put his headphones on. He was bobbing his head slightly to invisible music, eyes closed. He looked peaceful. To Harrison, he looked like a threat. "I'm not comfortable with it," Harrison stated, crossing his arms. Tim, the co-pilot, looked up from his pre-flight checklist. "Captain, we're due for pushback in 20, if he's got a ticket." "It's my discretion." "Tim," Harrison snapped. "The captain's authority is absolute regarding the safety and security of the flight. That kid is a red flag walking. Look at him. He's nervous, fidgety. He looks asleep, sir," Tim ventured quietly. "That's exactly what someone who is hiding something does. They feign relaxation." Harrison grabbed the manifest from Beatrice's hand. "Jordan King, no frequent flyer number, no history, a ghost. I'm not hauling a potential hijacker or a felon across the Atlantic." Harrison stormed out of the cockpit. He didn't want Beatrice to handle this. He wanted to do it himself. He wanted to feel the power of his position, to reassert the natural order of things. He approached Seat 1A. The other passengers in first class were settling in. A wealthy investment banker in 1C was sipping champagne. An elderly socialite in 2A was adjusting her pearls. They all looked up as the captain loomed over the boy in the hoodie. "Excuse me," Harrison said, loud enough for the cabin to hear. Jordan King didn't hear him. The noise-cancelling headphones were doing their job. Harrison's jaw tightened. He reached out and tapped the boy's shoulder hard. Jordan's eyes snapped open. He looked startled for a split second, then confused. He pulled his headphones down around his neck. His eyes were dark and intelligent, but currently filled with the disorientation of someone pulled from a vibe. "Yeah, can I help you?" Jordan asked. His voice was calm, deep for his age. "Ticket and ID," Harrison demanded. He didn't say please. He held out his hand, palm up, expectant. Jordan blinked. "I already showed them at the gate, and at TSA. And now you're showing them to me," Harrison said, leaning in. "Unless you want to explain why you're sitting in a seat that costs more than your entire wardrobe." A hush fell over the first-class cabin. The investment banker in 1C lowered his glass. The air pressure seemed to drop. Jordan looked at the captain's hand, then up at his face. He didn't look scared. That infuriated Harrison even more. The boy reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out a boarding pass and a passport, and handed them over. Harrison snatched them. He opened the passport. Jordan Elijah King, American citizen, issued 3 months ago. He looked at the boarding pass. First class. Zone 1. It was all legitimate, and that made Harrison hate him. "How did you pay for this?" Harrison asked, flipping the passport closed with a snap. Jordan shifted in his seat. "I bought it. Online. With whose card? Mine. Yours." Harrison let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "You expect me to believe a teenager in a hoodie has the liquidity for this? What's in the bag? Son." He gestured to the battered backpack shoved under the seat in front of Jordan. "Laptop, chargers, a book," Jordan said. His voice was tightening. "Is there a problem, Officer Orr?" "Captain." "The problem is I don't believe you." Harrison said. He handed the documents back, but he didn't move. I think you're a security risk. I think you're running something, and I don't fly with risks. I'm not a risk, Jordan said, his voice remaining level, though his hands clenched slightly on the armrests. I'm just going to London for a meeting. A meeting, Harrison repeated, looking around at the other passengers as if to share the joke. Right. A meeting. Listen, kid. I've been flying for 30 years. I can spot trouble from the terminal. Your trouble. I haven't done anything, Jordan said. You don't belong here, Harrison said, the subtext becoming text. And until you're off my plane, these wheels remain choked. Beatrice appeared at Harrison's elbow. Captain, the gate agent is asking for confirmation to close the doors. Tell them to wait, Harrison said, never breaking eye contact with Jordan. We have a passenger removal. Jordan's eyes went cold. You're kicking me off for what? Captain's discretion. Harrison smiled. It was a cruel, thin smile. Incompatible with flight safety. Get your bag. Let's go. The silence in the cabin stretched, thin and brittle as glass. Jordan King didn't move immediately. He looked at the captain, studying him with an intensity that made Harrison uncomfortable, though he'd never admit it. It wasn't the look of a child being scolded. It was the look of an engineer analyzing a structural failure. You're making a mistake, Jordan said quietly. The only mistake was letting you board, Harrison countered. He turned to the cabin, addressing the other passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We have a security concern that needs to be resolved before we can depart. Thank you for your patience. He's just a kid. The voice came from row 3. A woman with red hair and a business suit stood up. He hasn't done anything. He's been sitting there quietly. Harrison bristled. He hated passenger interference. Ma'am, please sit down. You don't know the situation. I know what I see, the woman retorted. I see a bully. Sit down, Harrison barked. The command cracked like a whip. The woman hesitated, then slowly sank back into her seat. Cowed by the authority of the uniform, Harrison turned back to Jordan. I'm done asking. Beatrice, get the gate agent. If he doesn't walk off, he gets dragged off. Jordan took a deep breath. He seemed to be calculating the odds. He looked at his watch, a cheap digital Casio. Harrison noted with disdain, and then nodded slowly. Fine, Jordan said. I'll get off. Smart choice, Harrison said, stepping back to let him out. Jordan stood up. He was taller than he looked while seated, almost eye level with Harrison. He grabbed his backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and stepped into the aisle. But he didn't walk to the door immediately. He stopped in front of Harrison. I need your name, Jordan said. My name is Captain Grant, Harrison said, pointing to the nameplate on his chest. Make sure you spell it right when you're crying to customer service. They'll give you a $50 voucher and delete your email. Harrison Grant, Jordan repeated. Sovereign Air, Flight 902. Move. Harrison pointed to the door. Jordan began to walk, the walk of shame. Every head in first class turned to watch him go. The investment banker looked annoyed at the delay. The elderly socialite looked pitying. As Jordan reached the galley, the gate agent, a frantic man named Greg, rushed onto the plane. Captain, what's going on? We're losing our slot. Escort this passenger out of the terminal. Greg, Harrison said, following Jordan to the door. He's off the flight. Greg looked at Jordan, then at Harrison. But why did he assault someone? He refused to comply with crew instructions and exhibited suspicious behavior. Harrison lied smoothly. I want him gone. and check his bag again. Thoroughly. Jordan stepped onto the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit him. He turned back one last time. "You really shouldn't have done this," Jordan said. It wasn't a threat. It sounded like advice. "Get off my airport," Harrison sneered. He grabbed the handle of the heavy aircraft door and slammed it shut himself, sealing the metal tube. He turned back to the crew. Beatrice was pale. Tim was staring from the cockpit doorway. "What are you all looking at?" Harrison snapped. "We have a schedule to keep. Cross-check doors. Let's fly." Harrison marched back to the cockpit, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He had protected his ship. He had maintained standards. He sat down in the pilot's seat and put his headset on. "Sovereign 902 ready for pushback." He radioed the tower, his voice crisp and confident. "Sovereign 902 hold position," the tower controller replied. Harrison frowned. "Tower, we are buttoned up and ready. We are already 10 minutes behind. Hold position 902. Ground stop issued for your aircraft. Ground stop for what weather?" Harrison looked out the window. It was clear. Company orders 902. Do not move. Repeat. Do not move. Harrison looked at Tim. Company orders. What the hell is operations doing? He grabbed the internal phone to call the operations center. It rang and rang. Meanwhile, back in the terminal, Jordan King wasn't crying to customer service. He wasn't being escorted out by security. He was standing near the gate desk, surrounded by Greg and 2 TSA agents who were looking very confused. Jordan had his phone out. He wasn't texting his mum. He was dialing a number that very few people possessed. "Yes," Jordan said into the phone. "It's me. Authorization code Alpha Kilo 9. Yeah. I'm at JFK. I need you to execute the clean slate protocol immediately." He paused, listening. "Yes. Right now," Jordan said, his eyes fixed on the plane through the glass window. "And get legal on the line. I just found the first redundancy we need to eliminate." On the plane. Harrison was getting angry. He keyed the mic again. "Tower, this is Sovereign 902. I demand an explanation. I have 300 souls on board and a schedule to keep." The radio crackled. But it wasn't the tower controller this time. The voice was different, deeper, authoritative. "Sovereign 902, this is Port Authority Police. Shut down your engines immediately." Harrison froze. "Police? What is this? Is there a bomb threat?" "Shut down the engines, Captain Grant," the voice commanded, "and remain in the cockpit. We are boarding." Harrison's heart hammered against his ribs. The kid, he thought. The kid really was a terrorist. I was right. I caught him, but he left something behind. "Tim, kill the engines," Harrison ordered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and vindication. "I knew it. That punk left a device." The engines whined down into silence. The lights flickered. Harrison waited for the SWAT team. He waited for the bomb squad. Instead, the cabin door opened, and he heard the heavy footsteps of boots. He spun his chair around as the cockpit door flew open. 2 police officers stood there, but behind them was a man in a sharp suit, Mr. Henderson, the regional director for Sovereign Air. Henderson looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "Captain Grant," Henderson said, breathless. "I knew it." Harrison stood up. "I knew that kid was dangerous. Did you catch him? What did he leave on the plane?" Henderson stared at Harrison with a look of absolute horror. "You idiot," Henderson whispered. "Excuse me." Harrison recoiled. "You didn't kick off a terrorist. Harrison," Henderson said, his voice rising to a shout. You just kicked off Jordan King. I know his name. Who is he? Some drug lord's son." Henderson grabbed the doorframe for support. Jordan King is the founder of Nexus Dynamics, the tech firm that signed the acquisition paperwork for Sovereign Air at 6:00 a.m. this morning. Harrison's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "He owns the airline." "Harrison," Henderson screamed. "He owns the whole damn fleet, and he just called the board of directors to ground you." The blood drained from Captain Harrison Grant's face so fast it left him dizzy. He gripped the back of the pilot's seat, his knuckles turning white. He owns it," Harrison stammered. The words felt like gravel in his mouth. "That's impossible. He's a child. He was wearing a hoodie." "He's 19 years old." "Harrison," Henderson snapped, stepping into the cramped cockpit. The police officers stayed in the galley, watching the scene with stoic faces. "He's a prodigy. He developed the flight logistics AI that half the world uses. He bought the majority stake in Sovereign to save us from bankruptcy. He was flying commercial today to see the operation from the ground up. An undercover boss scenario. Except he wasn't hiding his name. You were just too arrogant to check." "Tim," the co-pilot, slowly took his hands off the controls and placed them in his lap, distancing himself from his captain as if Harrison were radioactive. I was following protocol." Harrison tried to rally, his voice sounding thin and pathetic. He looked suspicious. He had no luggage. He was disrespectful. He was sitting in a seat he paid $12,000 for, Henderson yelled, "and you racially profiled the owner of the company and kicked him onto the tarmac." "I didn't profile him, save it for the inquiry." Henderson cut him off. He pressed his earpiece. "Yes, sir. I'm in the cockpit now." "Yes." "Understood." Henderson looked at Harrison with eyes that held zero sympathy. "Pack your bag. Harrison?" "What?" "You heard me. Pack your bag. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You are not flying this plane. You are not flying any plane with the Sovereign logo ever again." "You can't do this," Harrison sputtered. "I have a union. I have tenure. You can't fire me on the spot without a hearing." "Oh, I'm not firing you," Henderson said, a grim smile touching his lips. "I don't have the authority to fire you yet. But he does, and he's coming back on board." Harrison felt a wave of nausea. "He's coming back! Get out of the chair, Harrison!" Harrison moved like a zombie. He unbuckled, grabbed his flight bag, and squeezed past Henderson. As he stepped out of the cockpit, he saw the first-class passengers staring. They had heard the shouting. The investment banker looked amused. The red-headed woman who had defended Jordan earlier looked vindicated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Henderson announced to the cabin, his voice smooth and corporate. "We apologize for the disturbance. Captain Grant has been relieved of duty due to a personnel matter. A new crew is being assembled. However, we have a VIP guest rejoining us shortly." Harrison stood in the galley, trapped. The police blocked the exit. "Am I under arrest?" Harrison asked the officer. "No, sir," the officer said. "But we were asked to ensure you don't leave until the airline owner speaks with you." The jet bridge rumbled. The sound of footsteps approached. Jordan King walked back onto the plane. He hadn't changed. He was still wearing the slate-grey hoodie and the beat-up sneakers. But the energy around him had shifted tectonically. Before, he was a passenger. Now, he was a force of nature. He was flanked by two men in suits, his personal security detail, and Greg, the terrified gate agent. Jordan walked straight into the first-class cabin. He didn't yell. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He stopped in front of Harrison. Harrison, who was 6 feet tall, suddenly felt very small. "Captain Grant," Jordan said. Harrison couldn't meet his eyes. "Mr. King, There was a misunderstanding." "Was there?" Jordan asked. He pulled his phone out. "I have the audio recording. I started recording the moment you touched me. You don't belong here. I can spot trouble. Drug mule." Jordan held the phone up. "There's no misunderstanding. You saw a young black man in a hoodie and you decided I was a criminal. You didn't check my background. You didn't listen to your crew. You let your prejudice fly the plane." "I was protecting the flight," Harrison muttered. "You were protecting your ego," Jordan corrected. He turned to the cabin. "Everyone, I am Jordan King. I'm the new owner of Sovereign Air. I want to apologize for the delay. This man," he gestured to Harrison, "does not represent the values of this company anymore." He turned back to Harrison. "I'm not just firing you. Harrison, I'm grounding you. I've already contacted the FAA to file a formal complaint regarding your conduct and your fitness to fly. You exhibited paranoia, aggression, and poor judgment. You're a liability." "My pension," Harrison whispered. "I'm 2 years from retirement." Jordan's face hardened. "You should have thought about that before you tried to humiliate a paying customer. You're done. Get off my plane." This time, it was Harrison's turn for the walk of shame. He hefted his bag, his shoulders slumped. As he walked down the aisle, past the passengers he had tried to impress, nobody looked at him with respect. They looked at him like he was garbage. "Bye, Captain," the red-headed woman called out cheerfully. Harrison stepped onto the jet bridge, his legs heavy as lead. He walked into the terminal, where the morning sun was streaming in. But his world had gone dark. Back on the plane, Jordan turned to Beatrice. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," Jordan said softly. Beatrice smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. "We're just glad you're back. Mr. King, can I get you that orange juice now?" "Actually," Jordan smiled, "make it a champagne. I think I'm celebrating." But the drama wasn't over. As Harrison trudged through the terminal, his phone began to blow up. Jordan hadn't just fired him. The passengers had been filming. The video of Harrison poking Jordan and yelling, "You don't belong here," was already trending on Twitter. The hashtag Sovereign Racist was #1 in the country. Harrison stopped at a Hudson News stand and looked up at the TV screen. CNN was already running a banner. "Sovereign Air pilot grounds, new owner in racial profiling scandal." He watched his own face, twisted in anger, broadcast to millions. He realized then that the karma wasn't just hitting him. It was about to bury him. Captain Harrison Grant stood alone in the middle of Terminal 4, a man marooned on an island of his own making. The heavy glass doors of the jet bridge had hissed shut behind him, sealing his fate with a finality that made his stomach churn. He was still wearing his uniform, the navy blue blazer with the 4 gold stripes on the cuffs, the crisp white shirt, the hat tucked under his arm, but it suddenly felt like a costume. He walked toward the Hudson News stand, his gait stiff, trying to maintain the illusion of dignity. But the terminal, usually a place of anonymity where travelers rushed past like water in a stream, had changed. People were looking. He felt the eyes before he saw them. A group of college students near the charging station looked up, whispered, and then pointed. One of them held up a phone, the camera lens like a dark, unblinking eye fixed on him. Harrison turned away, his heart hammering against his ribs. "They know," he thought. How can they know already? It's been 10 minutes. He pulled out his own phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it. It clattered on the terrazzo floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. A young mother nearby pulled her child closer, giving Harrison a look of pure revulsion. He scrambled to pick it up. The screen cracked a spiderweb fracture right over his reflection. He unlocked it and opened Twitter. His breath hitched. Trending number 1, hashtag sovereign racist. Trending number 2, hashtag boycott. Sovereign trending number 3, hashtag Jordan King. He tapped the first hashtag. The top video had 2.4 million views. It was a shaky cell phone recording from row 2. It showed him, Harrison Grant, looming over the boy in the hoodie. The audio was crystal clear. I don't care who you think you are. Drug mule. Get off my plane. The caption read, Sovereign Air captain harasses a black teen for sitting in first class. Turns out the teen owns the airline. Karma is coming. Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. The comments were a landslide of vitriol. Fire him immediately. Revoke his license. This is what happens when you judge a book by its cover. By Boomer. I'm cancelling my flight right now. He needed a drink. He needed to sit down. He needed to call the union. He found a seat at an overpriced airport bar called the Tarmac Tap. He ordered a double scotch. Neat. The bartender, a guy named Rick who had served him 100 times before, slammed the glass down without a word. No coaster. No smile. Harrison gulped the amber liquid, the burn doing nothing to settle his nerves. He dialed the number for the Airline Pilots Association rep, Frank Miller. Frank, Harrison said, his voice raspy. I've got a situation. A situation. Frank's voice was tight, stressed. Harrison, are you out of your mind? I'm looking at your face on CNN right now. It's a misunderstanding, Frank. The kid looked like a thug. He was wearing a hoodie in first class. I was following security protocols. You have to back me on this. It's a safety issue. Safety issue. Frank laughed. A harsh, barking sound. You profiled the majority shareholder of the company, Harrison. There is no safety issue. There is only a PR nightmare. The union board is already meeting. We're getting pressure from the national chapter to distance ourselves. You can't abandon me. I've paid dues for 30 years, Harrison shouted, causing heads to turn in the bar. He lowered his voice to a hiss. I have rights. Due process. You have a morals clause in your contract, Frank said coldly, and you just violated it on camera in 4K resolution. Sovereign's legal team just sent us a notice. They aren't just suspending you, Harrison. They are coming for your pension. Harrison dropped the phone. The line went dead. His pension. The lake house in Michigan. The boat. The retirement he had been planning for a decade. It was all tied to that pension. He looked up at the TV screen above the bar. The news anchor was speaking solemnly. Breaking news regarding Sovereign Air. Following the incident at JFK, we are now hearing reports that the airline's leadership is taking unprecedented action. We go live to Sovereign Air HQ in Chicago. Harrison watched, paralyzed. While Harrison was imploding in the terminal, the atmosphere inside the Sovereign Air boardroom in Chicago was electric. The room was dominated by a long mahogany table, currently occupied by terrified executives. At the head of the table stood a woman who terrified them even more than the plummeting stock price, Olivia Graves. Jordan King had appointed her as CEO only 6 hours ago, part of his stealth acquisition. Olivia was a legend in the corporate world, a fixer known for her ruthless efficiency and her zero-tolerance policy for incompetence. She was 45, sharp-featured, with eyes like flint, and a bob cut so precise it looked like it could cut glass. She wasn't looking at the executives. She was looking at the large screen on the wall, which displayed a live feed from Flight 902. Jordan King was on the screen, sitting in seat 1A, holding a glass of champagne. "Jordan," Olivia said, her voice amplified in the silent room. "We've seen the video. The captain has been removed. Are you ready to proceed?" "Do it, Olivia," Jordan said from the plane. His voice was calm, but there was a steeliness to it. "I don't want this to be about one bad apple. If Harrison felt comfortable doing that, the culture is rotten. Burn it down so we can rebuild it." Olivia nodded. She turned to the director of operations, a sweating man named Carl. "Carl," Olivia said, "ground them." Carl blinked. Excuse me, Ms. Graves ground, who the flight crew." "No," Olivia said, her voice ringing clear. "Ground the fleet, all of it." The room erupted. "You can't be serious. We have 400 flights in the air. The cost will lose $50 million in a day. The shareholders will revolt." Olivia slammed her hand on the table. The sound was like a thunderclap. Silence returned instantly. "The shareholders don't matter right now because she pointed to Jordan on the screen, owns 51%, and he has given the order. We are not running an airline that permits discrimination until every single pilot, flight attendant, and gate agent has undergone the new bias training protocol, and until every personnel file has been reviewed for similar complaints. Sovereign Air is closed for business." "But the logistics," Carl stammered. "This is not a debate," Olivia said, her eyes narrowing. "This is a reset. Send the order. Code red. Ground stop. Immediately." She turned back to the screen. "It's done, Jordan." "Thank you, Olivia," Jordan said. "I'll see you in London." Back at JFK, the chaos was about to multiply. Harrison was still staring at his scotch when the airport PA system chimed. It wasn't the usual soft tone. It was a repetitive, urgent alarm. "Attention passengers, this is a priority announcement. All Sovereign Air operations have been suspended effective immediately. All Sovereign aircraft currently at gates will remain grounded. All inbound flights are being diverted to the nearest suitable airports. We repeat, Sovereign Air has issued a global ground stop." The bar went silent. Then, the groans started. Harrison stared at the TV. The ticker tape at the bottom changed Sovereign Air flights, grounded globally. CEO Olivia. Graves cites systemic failure of values following viral incident. Harrison felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. He had thought he was just one man losing a job. He hadn't realized he was the domino that would topple the whole tower. He looked around. People were checking their phones. The anger was shifting. It wasn't just about the racist pilot anymore. Now, thousands of people were stranded, and they all knew who to blame. "Hey," a voice said behind him. Harrison turned. It was a large man in a construction vest, holding a beer. He looked angry. "You're him, aren't you? The guy on the news?" Harrison tried to stand up. I need to go." "My daughter is in Denver," the man said, stepping closer. "She was supposed to fly home for her wedding tomorrow. Now her flight is cancelled because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." "It wasn't me." Harrison lied, backing away. "It was the company. It was you." A woman at a nearby table shouted, "I saw the video. You kicked that kid off for nothing." The bar was turning on him. It was a microcosm of the world outside. The mob was forming. Harrison threw a $20 bill on the bar and ran. He didn't walk. He ran. He scrambled out of the bar, down the concourse, ignoring the jeers and the pointing fingers. He needed to get to his car. He needed to get to the safety of his home in Connecticut. He reached the employee parking lot. Breathless, he fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so hard he scratched the paint of his pristine Mercedes. He got in, locked the doors, and slumped against the steering wheel. He was safe, for now. But as he drove out of the lot, his phone buzzed again. It was a text from his wife. "Eleanor, don't come home. 3 words." Harrison stared at them. He dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "Don't come home." The karma wasn't finished. It was just warming up. The next 3 days were a blur of lawyers, press conferences, and misery. Harrison Grant stayed at a cheap motel off the interstate. He couldn't go home. Eleanor had changed the locks. She had told him through a text message that she couldn't have the press camped on her lawn, that she couldn't be associated with a bigot. 30 years of marriage dissolved in the acid of public shame. But the worst was yet to come. Jordan King and Olivia Graves hadn't just grounded the planes. They had opened the archives in the Sovereign Air headquarters. A team of forensic data analysts was combing through 30 years of flight logs and complaint files. They were looking for a pattern, and they found it. It wasn't just Jordan. On a Tuesday afternoon, Harrison's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered it, hoping it was Eleanor. "Mr. Grant." A woman's voice, sharp, professional. "Yes, is this Eleanor?" "No, Mr. Grant. This is Rachel Zane, General Counsel for Sovereign Air." Harrison sat up on the lumpy motel bed. "I'm not saying anything without my union rep." "Your union rep has formally recused himself," Rachel said calmly. "I'm calling to inform you that we are filing a civil suit against you for damages." "Damages?" Harrison laughed hysterically. "You fired me. You ruined my life. What more do you want? We have uncovered 17 separate incidents over the last 10 years. Mr. Grant, 17 complaints from passengers of color that were dismissed by previous management under the guise of captain's discretion. A doctor from Nigeria you kicked off for smelling strange. A Latino family you moved to the back of the plane because you needed the seats for crew that never showed up. We have the records. Harrison, you didn't just make a mistake with Jordan King. You are a habitual offender." Harrison felt the room spin. Those were operational decisions. "They were discriminatory practices," Rachel corrected. "And because of your actions on Tuesday. Sovereign Air has lost an estimated $40 million in revenue due to the grounding and the subsequent brand rehabilitation. We are suing you for breach of contract and gross negligence. We are seeking to recoup a portion of those losses from your assets." "My assets?" Harrison whispered. "I have a house, a 401k. "Not for long," Rachel said. "You have been served. Mr. Grant, have a good day." Harrison dropped the phone. He walked to the window and looked out at the bleak parking lot. He had always believed he was untouchable. He was a captain, a god of the sky. He believed the rules didn't apply to him because he was the one who enforced them. Now, the rules were crushing him. He turned on the TV in the motel room. A talk show was on. They were interviewing Jordan King. The boy looked different now. He was wearing a suit. Though he still had the sneakers, he looked calm, thoughtful. "Mr. King," the host asked, "critics say you went too far. You grounded an entire airline because of one man. Was that necessary?" Jordan leaned forward. It wasn't about one man. Harrison Grant was a symptom, If I had just fired him, nothing would have changed. I had to show the world that Sovereign Air is different now. We don't just fly people, we respect them. And if that cost me $40 million, it was cheap. And what about Captain Grant? The host asked. Do you have anything to say to him? Jordan looked directly into the camera. For a second, Harrison felt like the boy was in the room with him. I hope he learns, Jordan said. I don't hate him. I pity him. He lived his whole life thinking he was better than other people because of a uniform. Now he doesn't have the uniform. I hope he finds out who he really is. Harrison turned off the TV. He sat in the silence. He knew who he was. He was a man with nothing. 1 year later. The alarm clock didn't hum. It screamed. It was a cheap plastic unit that rattled against the nightstand, a jarring B-flat buzz that drilled into Harrison Grant's skull at 4:30 a.m. He slapped it off, his hand fumbling in the dark. For a split second. In the haze of waking, his brain reset to the default setting of the last 30 years. He expected to smell the crisp, filtered air of a high-end hotel room in London or Tokyo. He expected to see a pressed uniform hanging on the door, the 4 gold stripes of a captain catching the early light. He expected to reach for his phone and see a notification from crew scheduling about his pickup time. Then, the smell hit him. It wasn't filtered air. It was the scent of damp drywall, stale takeout, and the distinct, musty odor of a basement apartment in Queens that hadn't seen direct sunlight since the Reagan administration. Harrison sat up, the springs of the mattress groaning in protest. He rubbed his face, feeling the rough stubble on his chin. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. Captain Grant never went a day without a shave, but Harrison Grant, the bus driver for the City Transit Authority, didn't care anymore. He swung his legs out of bed, his feet touching the cold linoleum. He walked to the kitchenette, a glorified closet with a hot plate, and started a pot of instant coffee. As the water boiled, he looked at the calendar tacked to the wall. November 14th. It was the anniversary. Exactly 1 year since he had stood in the aisle of Flight 902 and pointed a finger at a teenager in a hoodie. 1 year since he had ended his own life with 5 sentences. Harrison took his coffee to the small table that doubled as his dining room and desk. Piled high on the corner were the remnants of his former glory, now reduced to legal paperwork. The civil suit from Sovereign Air had been a bloodbath. Rachel Zane, the relentless general counsel, hadn't just won. She had performed an autopsy on his career while he was still watching. They had settled out of court to avoid a public trial that would have humiliated him further. But the terms were draconian. He had lost the lake house in Michigan, sold to pay for the legal fees. He had lost 60% of his pension, garnished to pay for the reputational damages Sovereign Air claimed his viral racism had caused. And then there was Eleanor. He looked at the envelope on top of the pile. Decree of dissolution of marriage. Eleanor hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown plates. She had simply packed her bags the day the hashtag sovereign racist trended for the 3rd time. She told him she couldn't show her face at the country club anymore. She told him that their friends, the doctors, the lawyers, the other pilots had stopped returning her calls. She didn't leave him because he was broke. She left him because he had become a pariah, a social radioactive isotope. Enjoy your flight, Harrison, she had said as she walked out the door. Now he was alone. He finished his coffee, the bitter taste lingering on his tongue, and pulled on his new uniform. It wasn't navy blue wool. It was a polyester blend, light blue, stiff and uncomfortable. The patch on the shoulder didn't feature wings. It featured the city seal. He grabbed his keys and walked out into the grey morning drizzle. His Mercedes was long gone, repossessed 6 months ago. He walked 3 blocks to the depot, head down, collar up, avoiding eye contact with the neighbours who knew exactly who he was. At the depot, the dispatcher, a gruff man named Sal, tossed him a clipboard. Route 42 today. Grant, the Crosstown Express. Try to keep it on schedule this time. We got complaints last week about you missing stops. It was traffic. Sal, Harrison muttered, taking the clipboard. Yeah. Just drive the bus. Captain, Sal sneered. The nickname wasn't affectionate. It was a knife twist. Everyone at the depot knew. To them. He was a joke, the guy who had it all and threw it away because he couldn't handle a black kid in first class. Harrison climbed into the driver's seat of the massive, articulated bus. The seat was worn, the leather cracked. The steering wheel was sticky. There was no autopilot here. No first officer to handle the radio. Just him, the wheel, and the chaos of the city streets. The morning shift was a nightmare. The bus was packed with commuters tired, angry, pushing and shoving. "Move back!" Harrison yelled into the rearview mirror, his voice hoarse. "There's room in the back." "Shut up and drive," a voice shouted back. Harrison gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white. A year ago, if a passenger had spoken to him like that, he would have had them arrested by federal marshals. Now, he just had to take it. He was a servant to the very public he had once looked down upon from 30,000 feet. At 10 a.m., he pulled the bus to a layover stop near the financial district. He had 15 minutes before the next loop. He leaned back, closing his eyes, trying to find a moment of peace. Knock, knock. He opened his eyes. A man was standing at the glass doors of the bus, waving. Harrison recognized him instantly. It was Tim Leach, his former co-pilot. Harrison hit the button to open the doors. Tim stepped up, looking hesitant. He was wearing the Sovereign Air uniform, crisp, clean, with 3 stripes on his shoulder. He looked healthy, happy. "Harrison," Tim said, standing on the bottom step. "I saw you pull up. I didn't believe it when I heard." Harrison stared at him, shame burning in his chest. "Hello, Tim." "How are you holding up?" Tim asked, his eyes scanning the dirty interior of the bus. "I'm surviving," Harrison said stiffly. "It's a job." Tim nodded awkwardly. "Look, I can't stay long. I'm on a layover. We're flying the London route today, the 777. The London route. Harrison's old route. "Who's in the left seat?" Harrison asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Captain Reynolds." "She's great," Tim said. Then he hesitated. "Harrison, you should know. Things have changed. The airline is... It's incredible now. Jordan King poured millions into crew welfare. We got a 20% raise across the board. The new training is actually useful. Morale is through the roof." Harrison felt a physical pain in his gut. "That's good. Tim, I'm happy for you." Tim looked at his watch. "I gotta run. But..." "Hey." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper. "You might want to see this, or maybe you don't, but you can't avoid it forever." He placed the paper on the dashboard. "Take care. Harrison." Tim stepped off the bus and jogged away, disappearing into the crowd of suits and tourists. He was going back to the sky, back to the world of respect and luxury. Harrison looked at the newspaper. It was the Financial Times. The headline took up the entire top half of the page. The Sky King, how Jordan King turned a failing airline into a global empire. There was a photo, a large, high-resolution color photo of Jordan King. He was standing on the tarmac at Heathrow, shaking hands with the Prime Minister. He looked older than 19 now. He looked like a titan. He was wearing a bespoke suit, but he still had those high-top sneakers on a signature look that had become a global fashion trend. Harrison's trembling fingers turned the page. There was an interview. Interviewer, Mr. King. Many say the turning point for Sovereign was the incident with Captain Grant. Do you ever think about him, Jordan King? I think about the lesson he taught us. He taught us that legacy doesn't mean anything if it's not built on equity. Captain Grant represented an old way of thinking that respect is something you hoard, not something you give. When we grounded the fleet, we didn't just fix the planes. We fixed the soul of the company. I don't bear him any ill will. I just hope he's found a place where he can learn to see people for who they are, not what he assumes they are. Harrison read the words twice. I don't bear him any ill will. That was the worst part. If Jordan had hated him, if he had been angry, Harrison could have justified his own bitterness. He could have told himself it was a war, but it wasn't a war. It was a dismissal. Jordan King had transcended him completely. Harrison was just a footnote in Jordan's success story, a cautionary tale told to new hires during orientation. Harrison looked out the windshield. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were breaking. Directly across the street, a massive digital billboard flickered to life. It was one of those wraparound screens that covered the corner of a skyscraper. The image shifted. It was a new ad campaign for Sovereign Air. The screen showed a young black boy, maybe 10 years old, looking out the window of a plane, eyes wide with wonder. A pilot, a black female captain, was kneeling next to him, handing him a set of plastic wings. The text faded in, "The sky belongs to everyone." And then, the Sovereign logo. Harrison stared at the billboard. He felt tears prick his eyes hot. Angry, helpless tears. He had loved the sky. He had given his life to it. And he had lost it because of a moment of blindness. He had looked at a king and seen a criminal. He checked his watch. 10:15 a.m. High above the city, a roar cut through the ambient noise of traffic. Harrison looked up through the windshield. A Sovereign Air, Boeing 777, was climbing out of JFK, banking gracefully over the city, its silver fuselage catching the sun. It was Flight 902, his flight. He watched it climb, higher and higher, until it was just a speck against the blue, free of the traffic, free of the grime, free of him. "Hey, driver." A woman banged on the plexiglass partition. "Are we moving or what? I got places to be." Harrison looked at the woman. She was middle-aged, tired, holding 3 grocery bags. She looked like she had had a hard day. A year ago, he would have sneered. He would have told her to wait. But Harrison Grant was tired too. He was so tired. "I'm sorry, Mom," Harrison said, his voice cracking slightly. "We're moving now." He released the parking brake. The bus shuddered and lurched forward, heavy and grounded, merging back into the endless, gridlocked traffic of the city. He drove on, gripping the sticky wheel, while the boy he had tried to ground soared halfway to London, untouchable. The karma hadn't just hit back, it had reshaped the world, leaving Harrison Grant exactly where he belonged in the rearview mirror. And that brings us to the end of the saga of Captain Harrison Grant and Jordan King. It's a powerful reminder that the higher you climb, the harder you fall, especially when you try to push others down on your way up. Harrison lost his career, his fortune, and his family, not because of cancel culture, but because of the consequences of his own prejudice. Meanwhile, Jordan King showed that true power comes from dignity and vision. What did you think of Harrison's fate? Did he deserve to lose everything, or was the punishment too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that karma is always watching. And subscribe for more real-life inspired drama stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.